Hi everyone, so today I wanted to discuss rosehips, and specifically because I know this time of year when winter starts to roll in and all of a sudden the green grass and trees are covered with layers of snow, kind of gets disheartening for a lot of foragers and a lot of naturalists in general, who like to be outside. The landscape changes a lot and there's a lot less wild food available in terms of plants. So something I wanted to discuss that's around all winter, all season in the winter time is rose hips. And I guess I have some tea bags on top of there, but I will show you. I have them stored in this little wicker basket. Um, I've got quite a plethora of hips here. And of course, this wasn't gathered over one trip. This was multiple different trips. And I'd recommend if you are going to harvest an abundance of them to do it over quite a few different occasions. This was gathered over 6 to 10 trips approximately. So just to keep in mind of sustainability and biodiversity and the other wildlife that depend amongst these species, you just want to keep in mind how much you're harvesting. So yeah, this was harvested over quite a few times, and big game animals such as deer and moose graze on rose hips, and it's something to keep in mind because like I said, there's certain plants that you can only forage for during the spring or the summer, and rose hips are available all throughout the winter. So around January, when food sources start to get more scarce for wildlife, they depend more heavily on these hips. So yeah, foraging is really important to keep in mind of the ecology and everything else that's going on in the ecosystem. So enough about that, more about the rose hips. So basically there's quite a few different varieties of hips that are native to the province that I live in and the Prairie region in general. These are mostly prairie rose, so Rosa woodsii. All members of the rose family are in the Rosaceae family. Some other species in that family are Saskatoons, cherries, plums, apples. The list goes on and on. A lot of commercially important crops are in the rose family. So a little bit of identification when you're looking at any rose plant, you want to look for pinnately compound leaves. So you want to look for leaves that are in groups of around 5 to 7, and the leaves will be usually toothed and oblong shaped. And the rose hips are really, really interesting because you can see these ones are dried, but they've got a very fleshy outer skin to them. So if you're going to eat them fresh, you'll want to note that they have lots of seeds or achenes, and the seeds are hairy. They've got lots of like fibrous hairs on them. And those are unpalatable and they can cause some digestive upset. So if you are going to eat rose hips like as a trail snack, you want to make sure that you sort of pop the skin off and separate them from all the seeds so that you're not digesting the impalatable seeds. Some indigenous tribes would refer to rose hips or like the condition that you would get from the rose hips as itchy bum, just because it would cause a lot of, gastrointestinal upset and, some upset down there. As far as diarrhea and things. So just be cautious. You definitely don't want to get itchy bum. So you can ingest these fresh or dried. You can use rose hips in a tea. You can use them in jams, jellies. You can infuse them in honey, wine, syrups. You can make a really medicinal syrup from rose hips because another fun fact about them is one single rose hip actually has the vitamin C equivalency to an orange. So that's pretty neat. And you will see this one doesn't have it, but this one has like a husk at the end that protects the seed or the seeds inside. And yeah, they've got tons of uses. Rose hips are high in vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K. They're very good for the skin, and they have lots of emollient properties. So you'll see commercially that rosehip oil is actually extracted from the seeds. They're used special press or special tools to get the oils out of them, but that is where rosehip oil comes from, is the seeds. They also traditionally have been used and mixed with grease and applied on the skin as a poultice. So you can mash the fresh rose hips, mix it with grease, or even if you want to do it over the stovetop, you could mix it with beeswax and apply a poultice. That's traditionally how indigenous tribes would use rose hips. They also would utilize the stems, the young leaves, and bark as an eye wash, and again for skin ailments. Trying to think some other cool things that I've personally done with rose hips. They make a really awesome tea. I like to kind of let them simmer for about an hour to really get the full flavor profile and the full phytonutrients to really pull from the rose hips from the water. So what I'll do is I kind of put, I guess, about a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons to about 12 to 13 ounces of water, and kind of let that simmer on low heat for about an hour. Let it come to a roaring boil and then put it on the simmer. And yeah, then you will have a beautiful tea long decoction. I really think that rose hips have kind of a citrusy, sort of florally flavor. They're really, really delightful. I quite enjoy the taste of them, and I just get so excited seeing a large rose plant just full of prolific rose hips. You'll often find them in thickets, prairies, open woodlands, around riparian areas, so on lake shores and stream beds. They are really, really prolific around water, I've noticed. The rose hips that I see in kind of sandy, drier soil aren't as big as the rose hips that you'll notice along shorelines and riverbanks. They really tend to get bigger when they have more access to water. I really love rose hips. I think that they're an awesome plant to connect with, especially this time of year when we aren't able to connect with some of our other plant allies. And I really encourage you to give these a try and try and find some. I know in my area, they're everywhere in our provincial park, like 10 minutes away along the river, right in the backyard. So you're bound to find some species of rose that's native to your area. One other thing I guess I should note quickly here about rose hips, about the Rosaceae family in general, is that all of the plants have some matter of like a cyanide compound contained in the seeds, but heating them, so turning them into jams or jellies, or putting them on the stovetop or oven of any kind, will denature those compounds so that they're not at a toxic level. So that's something to keep in mind. I know there is some debate about that, especially with choke cherries. So the heat does denature some of those toxic alkaloids or cyanide compounds. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, I also found out recently when I was researching for rose hips that indigenous tribes used the inner bark. They would dry the inner bark of the stems and actually kind of smoke it like a tobacco mixture along with some willow species and red osier dogwood. So yeah, another really cool fact about rose hips. So I hope that I encouraged you to get out there and get connected in some way with this beautiful plant. They smell delightful, fresh, dried, and there's so many different ways that you can work with rose hips. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments or shout me a comment, I guess, a message. I'm new to this kind of thing, but yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. Take care and enjoy. Bye.